Welcome to the Escape and Empower podcast. Escape from the corporate rat race to empowered franchise ownership. Are you ready to take control of your destiny, follow your dreams, and live life on your own terms? Join our hosts, Dave and Pete, for insights on how to break free from the corporate grind, ditch the 9-to-5, and step into empowered franchise ownership.
Good morning, Pete. How are you today?
Good morning, Dave. I am pumped up.
I am always pumped up. Welcome to the Escape and Empower podcast. My name is Dave Greenberg, and I'm here with my co-host, Pete Gilfillan.
It's exciting to be here. You know, Dave, we're on a mission. We're a mission to help people, executives, couples, take control of their destiny, to live life on their own terms. And that's what we do every day, is to help people explore to see if franchising may be a potential path. And so what are we going to talk about today?
Well, one of the things our candidates usually talk about early on in the process is, how do you finance these things? And yes, we have a solution because there's a couple really good companies in the industry. But today we are very happy to have Christine Hansen from FranFund. Hello, Christine.
Hello. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Pete and Dave. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So, Pete, what we were thinking about, what we talked about today is, who is FranFund? And then we'll talk about maybe what are the different funding strategies or combination of things you can do to fund a franchise investment. And then what the timing is associated with it, so you can kind of, level set your expectations about when you can actually make something happen from a funding standpoint if you need financing. Does that make sense, Pete?
Makes sense. So, Christine, tell us a little bit about FranFund. I know it's an awesome company, but let's tell everybody what you guys are about.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So FranFund has been operating for over a little 18 years now. Our organization was founded by a veteran in the franchising industry who had experience in franchise development, sales, operations, and even franchise ownership. So he had a good understanding of the needs that folks have when they're trying to put together funding strategies for new businesses. And our company is headquartered here in Fort Worth, Texas.
All right. TCU, I think, is in Fort Worth, Texas. Is that right?
Yes, the owners are huge fans. So even though our colors are primarily orange, you'll see a lot of purple in our office if you ever stop by.
Don't forget the Longhorns now. It's not too far away, and they're doing well this year. It was a good weekend if you're a Longhorn fan.
Well, yeah, absolutely, right? So, or even SMU. Those Texas teams are doing real well this year, so for sure.
Absolutely.
So FranFund is an organization, and you've got, for lack of better terms, different groups within FranFund to provide all the different assistance somebody would need in terms of financing. So tell us a little bit about kind of the different ways in which you can help people fund a business, or combinations of ways in which you can fund a business.
Absolutely. So I like to break it up into 4 major categories. First category would be self-funding with cash. So cash is obviously an option to fund a business. There's also an option that folks may or may not have heard of, but it's an IRS program that would allow you to access some of your retirement dollars to invest into a business tax-deferred and penalty-free when it comes to that option. So self-funding, utilizing your own cash resources, and or retirement funds.
Okay, and there's a term for the retirement funds when you use that. What is that called?
Yes, it's called the Rollover for Business Startup Program, ROBS, ROBS, you may hear about it. So that is the acronym.
And so just so we're clear, I can have a 401k, I can have an IRA, and I can use that money in a tax compliant way to fund my business. And that's a process that takes a little bit of setting up, right? And you guys help with that, is that correct?
Yeah, so FranFund has been a provider of this program for the last 18 years. And what's really great about this program is that what essentially you're doing is a lot of folks are comfortable with betting on themselves and starting up a new business or franchise versus what the market is doing with their money. So you're not going to take a withdrawal from your retirement account and face the early withdrawal penalty of 10%. And then depending on your tax bracket, there could be 20 to 30% taxed on that money as well. So instead of taking out that withdrawal, facing those taxes and early withdrawal penalty, what essentially you're doing is redirecting your investments into your own business, into starting up a new business or franchise, and really betting on yourself.
That's really cool. So when we're talking about this, what you're saying is that I can take my retirement dollars and I have, for lack of better terms, an IRA, and instead of that IRA or that retirement account investing in stocks and bonds, it actually invests in my business. So my retirement account will own my business. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct. So I like to treat it as like you have this now retirement plan that's like your silent business partner or investor, but it so happens to be a retirement plan.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And I think in today's world, that allows you to diversify your assets and your income. And so some product manager or stock portfolio manager isn't kind of in charge of your money. You're in charge of your money. It's like you're putting yourself in a position where you're in complete control of leveraging your retirement dollars to set up a business.
Absolutely.
Pete, I'd add something to that, Pete, because a lot of my candidates say, I want to invest in myself. There's nothing better than betting on someone that you and something that you're going to control your business, as opposed to some market or some person out there managing your money. And I just love the idea of, invest in what you. And now it's a great way to take a look at that 401k and maybe put it to better use and make a bet on yourself. I just love that, what you just outlined, Christine.
And I agree with you when you had mentioned the word diversification. So you don't have to utilize all of your retirement dollars. So what we could do is partially roll over funds that you do want to use for this project. And then if you, the other funds that are not touched can keep doing what it's doing, investing in the market. You don't have to feel like you're betting 100% of your retirement dollars into starting up a new business or franchise, but it also could be used as a diversification of funding, whether you want to utilize this option in combination with cash or debt financing or some other funding vehicle, which we'll continue to talk about the options on this podcast as well.
So 2 great options, right? Self-fund, and then we also talk about the ROBs. So tell us about the third funding strategy.
The other is going to be debt funding. So another common funding strategy includes borrowing money. And this could be maybe you're going to borrow from your equity that you have in your home, so a home equity line of credit. But this also includes bank loans. Lending is another popular strategy out there. For those folks that may not aware, it stands for the Small Business Administration. From a structural perspective, I think folks get confused. They think that, the Small Business Administration is just out there lending folks money to start up a new business or franchise. But actually the SBA, the Small Business Administration, what they're doing is they're actually providing a guarantee to banks across the country to provide these loan options to entrepreneurs. So banks do rely on the guarantee that they're getting from the federal government, which is why you will commonly hear a lot of banks out there utilizing this type of a loan product. And it's a great funding option for folks because it can fund anywhere from $100,000 all the way up to $5 million.
Yeah, and so when we talk about the SBA loan, there are all kinds of different financial institutions that provide the SBA loan to candidates and stuff like that. But I think there's an advantage to not going to your local bank in your community, but rather working with FranFund to help find that SBA loan. So can you tell us a little bit about why it's so important to work with somebody like FranFund to secure an SBA loan?
Absolutely. So FranFund, even though we're not a direct bank or lending institution, what we have done is we have established relationships with the top SBA banks across the country who are franchise and small business friendly. Because I think what most folks end up doing is they'll walk into their local bank, maybe they have a relationship with a banker there and they say, I want to start up a new business or franchise. But they don't understand that all banks do not treat this type of loan equally. They might have no idea of the different franchise businesses or industries out there. They might have certain loan amounts that they only are willing to lend to. So what we have done is we've really focused and target our relationships with those banks. So you don't have to go from bank to bank to bank trying to figure out who's going to be that bank that's going to lend you the money. We already have that foundation established for you all. And we even have a dedicated franchisor relations department who also builds relationships with these franchisors. So by the time we have somebody that comes to us, we already have validated this franchise brand with the banks that we work with. They like what they see, the numbers. So we do a lot of that groundwork ahead of time. So you feel good knowing that we can speak the same language when it comes to your different options and who to go to.
And this is significant because, I had a candidate that decided that he wanted to use his local bank. He had a relationship with them. So he went to try to get an SBA loan for the franchise concept. And the bank didn't understand the business model, didn't understand the franchise, right? And so they put him through a lot of hoops of trying to get information about the franchise concept. And then ultimately they kind of turned it down. And so the benefit, in just very simple layman terms, is that FranFund understands a good portion of the franchise business models. They've developed relationships with the financial institutions that have a propensity to do SBA loans for those franchises. And so it's just an easier, faster, simpler process getting an SBA loan through somebody like FranFund.
Exactly. And I know you folks, Dave and Pete, that you're working with folks that have never done this before. And so they're trying to focus on, finding that right franchise opportunity for them. They don't want to have to worry about their funding strategy, to that in that topic. So what ends up happening is FranFund aligns with your process and act as this loan consultation service. So not only do we provide the right connections to which banks to go to, but we also act as a loan consultation service to mitigate a lot of the administrative burden that comes with putting together loan documentation and putting that package together and handhold these franchisees through this process when it comes to getting their loans funded and across the finish line.
So it sounds like the SBA loan is a great option, right? But talk to us a little bit more about now, you could have mentioned home equity lines to use that to fund your business, because it's in most cases, it's people's largest asset, maybe retirement dollars or their home, it's their largest asset. So how do they tap the equity in their house to fund their business?
Absolutely. So even though this is something that FranFund may not execute internally in-house because it's not a business loan product, what we find, a lot of the smaller local credit unions are facilitating this type of product. But what's really great is that, let's just say you have a potential franchisee that could be low in liquidity and want to utilize this as their cash injection, or some folks call it a down payment for an SBA loan. Well, there are SBA banks out there, and especially ones that we've established relationships with, that if somebody does need to utilize a home equity line of credit to fulfill their cash injection requirement, they'd be willing to accept that as long as the person is able to show that they are able to support both of these funding strategies. So what we do is help you piecemeal together, okay, what is your specific financial situation? And to your point, if you do have a lot of your assets within your home equity, then how can we leverage that to accomplish your ultimate goal of being a franchise owner?
Hey, question for you, Dave. I know, like everybody else, you kind of end this a lot in terms of leveraging the capital. Do you see candidates actually using equity in their house to fund their business?
Absolutely, or lines of credit sometimes. The equity injection always comes up in the consultation when we talk about total project costs and think about overall investment. The question that I always get is, what is the typical equity injection requirements? And what would you answer? How would you answer that, Christine?
So when it comes to the SBA lending environment, things are constantly changing. But currently today, we see anywhere from up to 20% of your own cash resources towards the project. But a couple things to keep in mind. Let's just say you don't have all of this liquidity in your checkings and savings. That's where the ROBS rollover for business startup is a good complement to an SBA loan to fulfill that piece of the puzzle, or that home equity line of credit. And another great thing and fun fact is that when you are looking at franchise ownership with Pete and Dave, one of the things that you'll understand when going through this process is that you would need to pay an initial franchise fee to secure your territory, get your foot in the door with the franchisor. And what's really great is that if you ended up paying that with either your own cash resources or the Rob's program, for example, that can count towards that equity injection and that skin in the game. And then you can utilize the SBA loan for any equipment, inventory, maybe there's build out costs, working capital. So those are some other ideas that you can consider when doing a combination of a few of these great options.
I just went through that, Pete, with one of my candidates, and he had a great 401k and he rolled over for the total project costs. But he came back to me and said, I want to go for growth. I want to step on the gas, but I need a little capital. What should I do? I said, go back and talk to Christine. And what did they do? They secured him an SBA loan for the additional capital that he wanted to, accelerate his growth. It's not just at the beginning when you're outlining what your strategy is to look at a single project cost. After you're into it, you can always go back and talk to Christine because, they want to fuel your growth and they're there to support that and have that conversation about, again, what's the second way you want to have a discussion about funding your franchise growth.
And I agree with that, Dave, because that also is a good segue for folks who do want to be multi-unit franchisees and really build that growth and empire. So a lot of these funding strategies that we brainstorm with potential franchisees could also align with their growth of being a second or third unit franchisee as well. So this is all applicable not just for one location, but also your path to multiple unit.
You'd mentioned 4 strategies, so I think we've covered 3 strategies now. Let's talk a little bit about the 4th strategy.
So the other one is going to be asset-backed funding. So let's just say, for example, you have non-retirement investments. So things are like portfolios, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. We do see folks get like a securities-backed line of credit or loan against those portfolios. Because it's specific to what investments you do have, you do want to speak to your financial advisor or wealth management firms that are housing those accounts. Now, as a heads up, I know financial advisors probably want to make sure that you keep the money invested into what you have already going on. That could definitely be some pushback there, but it is a common popular strategy that was worth mentioning in the mix. But also in that same category could be something like equipment financing if your business is going to be heavy equipment related as well. So I would say definitely those are going to be the main options: is cash, the rollover for business startup program, debt funding, and then an asset-backed funding.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'd mentioned that financial advisors, wealth managers, they don't want you to use your retirement dollars because then it's funds coming out of their control, right? They're managing or stuff like that. What I like about you guys is that you'll actually get on the phone with the wealth advisor and explain to them the ROPS, that it's not a threat, it's not risky from the standpoint, it's a mechanism that people use. But a lot of times people get pushback from their financial advisors, and you guys can help explain it so that there's less pushback.
Exactly. So whether it's your financial advisor or CPA that has a lot of reservations, typically it's just about education and getting them on the phone to understand that, hey, we're not completely cutting you out of this process, but we're a team for this potential franchisee to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish with being a business owner. So those conversations have gone really well. And I think that potential franchisees and these candidates really do appreciate that we take the time to also educate their team of people around them or their mentors to make sure that they are making an informed decision throughout all of this.
We talked about people going to their banking relationships for SBA and how often, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's a mistake. I've also had a few people try to work the rollover with their investment advisor because they've done it before. And I have to tell you, that's a huge mistake. I've never seen it in a good direction. Trust people like Christine and FranFund. to help you walk through the process because they're professionals in what they do and their experience is 18 years deep.
Yeah, and I think with the ROPS, you have to do it right. I had somebody that went with a discount company to do the ROPS, and they set it up wrong. The guy nearly violated ERISA laws. If he would have filed his taxes, he would have had huge fines, right? So with a FranFund, they have been through this for the last 18 years. They understand how to do the ROPS right. And they've got a nearly, if not perfect, record in regards to helping people do this. And that's really important as you go through this. So you always kind of leverage a FranFund or somebody like that to do your ROPS. And then with the SBA loans, it's just smarter to use somebody that understands the business models and understands the financial institutions that are buying that paper. So Christine, we've talked a little bit about the 4 ways. And what I like about FranFund, and you can kind of elaborate on this, is that you take those 4 mechanisms and you help people put together a personal funding plan for their business.
That is correct. When we have an initial funding consultation with folks, we brainstorm all of their potential paths for funding based on their specific situation. And we break down those categories to help them figure out what best funding strategy does make sense. So yes, absolutely. And you might have some one-offs there, like a rich uncle or getting gifted funds from mom and dad, those types of things. But typically those are the most common and most popular brainstorming session that we do when you have an initial funding call with either myself or one of the other 6 awesome funding consultants we have here at FranFund.
That's excellent. Dave, let's talk a little bit about timing. And I know you have very specific recommendations when you're working with candidates in regards to timing of setting up or learning about their funding options. So tell us a little bit. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with that.
So, we often talk about the process taking 4 to 6 weeks post-consultation. You should be, as a candidate, in a good position to complete your due diligence and be able to make a decision one way or the other, if everything goes right. And typically it does. One of the things that's super important is to understand timing. There's things that you need to do before you get to the end of the process. You always have to understand how you're going to fund the initial franchise fees. That's key in the process. The second thing you need to do is also work through a pre-approval so you can show your capability to fund the full total project costs. But timing is always super important because many times they don't understand when things take place and how long they take. So I make my introductions at every consultation, and Christine, take it from here and talk about the key things on timing that our candidates should understand.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would say that what FranFund does really well is we try to match the funding process with also the franchise process, investigation process that your candidates are going through. So for example, let's start with SBA lending. So when Dave or Pete is having their introduction calls, typically they're also going to have an introduction call to funding and some of the awesome franchisors that are out there. Now, once the candidate starts getting into some unit economics and some numbers, then maybe we talk about, hey, if you do want to utilize an SBA loan, why don't you find out what you pre-qualify for? So then you can also show and be prepared that as you get to your next phase of your franchise process, or even prior to your confirmation day, that you have a pre-approval letter in your back pocket, knowing that you have the confidence that you need, that you have a funding strategy in place. And then what will typically happen is that once they get pre-qualified, they have that letter, they attend their confirmation day with their funding strategy in the back of their mind, then that should give them the confirmation or that confidence that they need after confirmation day to move forward with the franchisor. And then what we'll do is FranFund will circle back around with them after their confirmation day with the franchisor, ask them how it went, and then we revisit the timeline of the administrative part of getting that SBA loan. Now, depending on the type of industry you're looking at, so if you're looking at a brick and mortar business where you're going to have to convert a lease space into that franchise model, then an SBA bank doesn't want to prematurely fund you when you don't even have a lease or location yet. So what franchisees typically do is work with FranFund while they're looking for that lease and location, because they're getting general contracting bids, what the lease final numbers are going to be, and we can input that in their loan documentation, so that information can be sent to the bank prior to loan closing and getting a scheduled closing date. I tell folks it's definitely a wide range for brick and mortar, 60 to 90 days or even months, but we try to match it specifically to that franchisee and their process. Now, if it's non-brick and mortar and you're looking at more of a service or home-based type of business, you don't have to look for a retail space, maybe a warehouse or a small office. So that we see those funding, of course, a lot quicker, 45, 60 days, maybe even longer. But I always tell folks, as a franchisee, your participation in providing FranFund, the banks that we're working with the information that is needed is also essential as well. But we're here to provide that support and work as a team.
So Christine, I want to make sure we're clear, right? So the idea is that you want to start learning about your funding options and the mechanisms as early as possible in the process. And then you guys kind of help them in regards to sequencing of when you need to do that.
Exactly.
But I want to be clear from the standpoint is that when we talk about the SBA loan, yes, that takes time. That can take a couple months, right? Mm-hmm. But when we talk about specifically leveraging your retirement dollars through the ROPS program, that's about a 3 to 4 week process. Right? Right. And if we're going to set up a home equity line, which I encourage everybody to set up a home equity line, might as well have that in place, even if you decide to invest or not invest in a franchise. But that doesn't take a couple months. That is kind of 3-4 weeks to get that
that's a quicker turnaround. Absolutely. And going back to the ROBS timeframe, which is 3 to 4 weeks. So you can go about it a couple different ways. That's common. So if you are going to pay your initial franchise fee with those funds, you need to start the process 3 to 4 weeks prior to you needing to pay that initial franchise fee. But what's really great about this program as well, let's just say that, you know what, I still want to do a little bit more due diligence, attend confirmation day, and I have the cash to pay my initial franchise fee out of pocket. Well, what's also common is that once we get somebody's business bank account funded with the ROBS program, they actually can have the C Corporation's business bank account replenish that money, because that is a business expense and the paper trails will show that. So timing should never be an issue when it comes to the ROBS program. We definitely can help you figure out the best time to do it. And it's more administrative, so it's pretty straightforward. And as long as your, again, participation is there with the funding, it's a really good mechanism for more of a quick, faster funding strategy.
So I just want to make sure we're putting this in layman's terms, right? So I decide I'm going to invest in a franchise, and my ROPS process is going through, and I'm going to get my money in 3 weeks. I can literally pay the franchise fee with my liquid capital, right? Mm-hmm. And so my personal money. And I can essentially, when the ROPS comes through, I can pay myself back. So I don't have to wait that 3 to 4 weeks to write the check to become a franchisee. I can secure the territories and get on with becoming an entrepreneur. Did I understand that correctly?
That is correct, because the money now is in a business bank account, and the paper trails will show that the business bank account is now replenishing from that individual's personal bank account. So yes, exactly.
All right, Dave, do you want to kind of bring a big summary to this and bring us home?
You know, I think peeling back the onion on this financing thing is fantastic, because, you know, the worst thing is something that's unknown. And how do you fix that? You get with an incredibly knowledgeable person who will fill you full of trust as soon as you meet her or them at FranFund, and you just start the process, because knowledge really takes place of all those things that might put up roadblocks. So understand what your funding strategy is. As you work with Pete and I individually, we will help you connect with Christine or someone at FranFund and take that step which is critical to you realizing your dreams and empowering yourself to become an entrepreneur and a small business owner. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, one of the things we probably need to point out we didn't cover is that to get educated, to learn about the ROBs, to learn about SBA loans, to learn about all this stuff, the services they provide, that's free. Christine, you provide that free. That's a free service. You're trying to earn their business down the line if they're going to do ROBs or an SBA loan, but educating our candidates, helping them through the process, it's free, correct?
That is correct. And it's a limited consultation. So we understand there's a lot of fear and a lot of information out there when you're going through this process. But that's why, whether it's myself or somebody here at FranFund, we are going to do this complimentary just to help folks make that informed decision at the end of the day.
Excellent. I love it, Pete. Our services are free. Their services is free. I don't know what stops anyone from giving us 15 minutes of time to see whether it makes sense for them to explore opportunities in the franchising space to own their own business. So thank you again, Christine. Pete, it was a wonderful time. I'm all about helping people hire themselves, as you love to say.
And become empowered.
And get funded.
Yeah, and get funded. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Escape and Empower podcast. We hope today's discussion has inspired you to consider franchise ownership as a path to living life on your own terms. Start your journey towards financial freedom and flexibility. Connect with Dave at empoweredfranchisee.com or Pete at hireyourself.com. Until next time.